Why time is the most underrated financial weapon. Money can be raised, talent can be hired, but time cannot be manufactured. This matters now because modern finance treats time as a constraint rather than an asset. Speed is rewarded. Acceleration is celebrated. Outcomes are judged quickly. Yet the most decisive advantages are rarely created through speed. They are created through duration, the ability to hold position while others are forced to move. Duration is not the same as inaction. It is the active, deliberate choice to preserve optionality by refusing to spend it prematurely. In finance, as in most strategic domains, the ability to wait is a form of power that does not appear on any balance sheet, but shapes every outcome it touches. To understand why time functions as a weapon, we need to rethink competition. In finance, advantage often goes not to those who act first, but to those who can wait longest without weakening. Time exposes fragility. It rewards structures that can endure pressure without adjusting prematurely. The participant who endures without deteriorating is, with every passing cycle, accumulating a relative advantage over those who are spending their reserves of patience. The longer the contest lasts, the more decisively this advantage expresses itself. London understands this dynamic deeply. The city has learned that time amplifies asymmetry. Participants with patience gain leverage without confrontation. They allow uncertainty to work in their favor. They let others exhaust themselves responding to noise. While attention shifts from crisis to crisis, long-duration positions quietly strengthen. The patient participant does not need to be cleverer than the impatient one. They only need to outlast them, and outlasting, in financial systems, is often sufficient. At first, this advantage is invisible. No dramatic wins, no urgent moves, no visible dominance. But beneath that calm, something powerful is happening. Time is filtering participants. Those dependent on immediate outcomes fall away. Those built for endurance remain. And with every cycle that passes, the relative strength of the patient increases. This is the first reveal. Time does not favor the bold. It favors the prepared. And when time is allowed to work uninterrupted, it becomes the most effective weapon in finance. Not because it moves quickly, but because it never stops. Time reshapes competition by changing who can afford to wait. In fast environments, pressure forces action. Decisions are made not because they are optimal, but because they are necessary. Capital is deployed early. Positions are taken before clarity exists. Flexibility is exchanged for momentum. And once that exchange happens, time begins working against those who move too quickly. They have committed resources that now cannot be redeployed without cost. They have taken on exposures that must now be managed rather than chosen. Their options have narrowed, while those of the patient participant remain open. London understands this pressure well. The city has watched how time exposes imbalance. Participants who rely on constant movement begin feeling strain first. Costs accumulate, attention fragments, mistakes compound. Meanwhile, those who structure themselves to endure delay experience the opposite. Their position strengthens as others weaken. This is how time creates leverage. It does not need to act. It only needs to persist. As uncertainty drags on, impatience grows. The desire for resolution intensifies. Those unable to wait start compromising. They accept worse terms. They take on additional risk. They shorten horizons further, accelerating their own exhaustion. Those who can wait observe calmly. They gather information. They let prices adjust. They allow desperation to surface elsewhere. Time filters participants without confrontation. No one is forced out directly. They simply fall behind. And as cycles extend, the advantage of endurance compounds faster than any short-term gain ever could. London's strength lies in recognizing this asymmetry early. Because once time begins separating those who can wait from those who cannot, outcomes are already leaning in one direction. And reversing that direction requires more than speed. It requires time, the one resource already spent. The conflict emerges when time begins favoring one side too strongly. As duration stretches, the gap between those who can wait and those who cannot widens. Pressure stops being symmetrical. Some participants experience time as opportunity. Others experience it as threat. The same passage of time strengthens one position while eroding another. London has seen this imbalance form repeatedly. When uncertainty persists, endurance becomes power. Institutions with long horizons feel no urgency to compromise. They let negotiations stall. They allow conditions to mature. Meanwhile, those operating on shorter timelines feel pressure intensify. Capital becomes trapped. Commitments harden. Optionality evaporates. This is where time stops being neutral. Waiting becomes strategy for some. Delay becomes danger for others. The system begins rewarding patience disproportionately. Outcomes tilt not because of superior insight, but because of structural endurance. Those who can afford to wait dictate terms. Those who cannot accept them. This creates tension. Markets begin feeling unfair. Results feel predetermined. Mobility slows. London understands that this phase is unstable. When time concentrates power too strongly, adaptation suffers. Innovation slows because entry becomes difficult. Opportunity narrows because endurance matters more than creativity. The system risks becoming static, not because it lacks intelligence, but because time has filtered participation too aggressively. This is the paradox of time as a weapon. Used too effectively, it stops competition rather than resolving it. And when competition fades, systems lose the very pressure that keeps them healthy. The question becomes unavoidable. How long can time be allowed to decide outcomes before the system itself begins to resist its verdict? The climax arrives when time's advantage reaches its limit. A point comes when endurance alone can no longer justify dominance. The system begins pushing back. Pressure builds not from impatience, but from stagnation. When waiting decides too much, movement disappears. And systems built on flow cannot survive without motion. London understands this inflection point well. At this stage, resolution does not come from outweighting others. It comes from reintroducing balance. Structures are adjusted. Access is widened selectively. Incentives are realigned to reward participation, not just endurance. Time remains powerful, but no longer absolute. This is the resolution of time as a weapon. Endurance remains an advantage, but it must coexist with movement. The system regains vitality. Competition returns. Opportunity reopens. Time continues shaping outcomes, but not alone. Other forces are allowed back into the equation. The lesson is nuanced. Time is the most underrated financial weapon, but like all weapons, it must be used with restraint. London's enduring strength lies not in exploiting time endlessly, but in knowing when its work is done, when patience has delivered its advantage, and when renewal must be allowed to prevent power from ossifying into stagnation. Because time can build dominance, but only balance keeps systems alive. Subscribe to join the journey. The deeper reason time is underrated is that its effects are inherently delayed. In a world where performance is measured by the quarter and reported by the month, the compounding work of duration is almost impossible to communicate while it is happening. It only becomes legible in retrospect, after the cycle has turned and the patient participant is still standing while others are recovering. This creates a persistent blind spot in financial systems. Because time's rewards are invisible during the years they are being earned, the discipline required to earn them is consistently undervalued, underfunded, and abandoned precisely when it is closest to paying off. Those who manage this discipline most effectively tend to do so not by resisting the short-term pressures around them, but by structuring their systems so those pressures do not reach the core of their strategy. They separate what must be responsive from what must be durable. They allow surface-level adaptation while protecting the long-horizon positioning that is actually generating advantage. This architectural distinction between the responsive and the durable is one of the most sophisticated things a financial institution can develop. It is not flashy. It does not generate headlines. But over cycles, it is what separates those who endure from those who are always starting over. London has refined this architecture over generations. The city has learned that time is not merely something that passes. It is something that reveals. It reveals which structures were genuinely robust and which were merely fortunate during favorable conditions. It reveals which relationships were built on mutual interest and which were built on convenience. And it reveals which institutions understood that the most powerful things in finance are not speed, intelligence, or scale, but the quiet, accumulating inexorable work of time applied to a well-structured position over a very long horizon.